honestly, guys and gals, I am amazed that it's 4:30 in the afternoon on a Friday afternoon. We're closing to high tea and you're still here. Thank you for that. And I hope this will be something that will bring some insights for you. So the story of this presentation dates back to somewhere close to 9 years ago when I started working with organizations, smaller and larger ones. The first IT organization I ever worked in was Nokia Siemens Networks, non-existent anymore, but basically a classic organization, especially for guys working in Wrocław. And since then, I have been working, the smallest organization I have worked with was a 12 people software house. The largest organization I have worked with and I keep working with is 120,000 people corporation that has places all around the world, and every of them is so very different that at first I couldn't actually grasp anything they have in common, but in fact, they actually have a lot. Recently, people are talking a lot about the successful or semi-successful large transformations. One of the most well-described of the recent ones is the GE transformation, headed by Jeffrey Immelt. But not only that one, there are many others. There are also many of our own neighborhood that have been more or less successful. What I would like to concentrate here in is the companies and organizations, or just smaller parts of companies, that I have seen have been successful for at least some time. Because you might see that some of those organizations have regressed after the time, but up until a point, they were able to continue some stable growth. So let's dive deeper into what I have discovered, and I hope that you will be able to see the same thing. So first, who here actually works for a software company? Many of you. I'm wondering, because I actually work for a software company. And I co-own a consulting company. We actually, even though we're working with people, we are a software company. I realized that something like close to 2 years ago, when my computer got stolen. And I realized that, seriously, the password that I really want to change the most is not the password to my bank. Is the password to my Google, where all my work is. And then I started noticing that software is actually a strategic asset in our company as well. But you might see that in other industries. Banks. Who here does not use online banking? It's good that I don't see a single hand. How are cartoons produced right now? Because the majority of them are just animations, right? There was one point Disney had to buy a software company to actually keep alive. They bought Pixar, right? Finances are going even more digital with completely digital currencies. Bitcoins and stuff, Ripples, so on, Ethereum. If you don't own some, at least you probably heard about them. So actually, our environment, everything that we actually even own, is turning into software. So some would say that every company right now is a software company. Even though we only give some I'll do some small tasks for people from the neighborhood, you still need software on your phones, which is close to 9 million lines of code. So a plumber from the neighborhood is using at least 9 million lines of code. Plus his car is an average 7.5 million lines of code, unless he drives a Tesla, that's a little more. But that's about it. Yeah? So we're kind of surrounded by software. What am I doing here? I'm actually speaking through a microphone that's processing my voice through software, and then I'm actually using my computer. You know, it's basically everywhere. So some would say that everybody is a software company. So if everybody is a software company, then shouldn't we all act as software companies? Let's take a closer look. Tale of two teams. Some of you might have heard that story from me before. Because years and years ago, I have been working with two organizations, kind of back to back. I stopped working with one, then I started working with another. In the first organization, I've been working with a team that was, actually they had their spot in an open space. On both sides, they were kind of encased by two walls, and one wall was missing. There was a corridor, so there were many people actually going around, going through their open space. It was loud. That team was freaking loud. They were actually disturbing others. That's why these walls were put up, so that they don't disturb other teams that were sitting next to them. If you observed them for half a day, you would have noticed that they are quarreling, they're fighting, they are watching some videos on YouTube, they are actually flying remote-controlled helicopters. They're constructing more and more post-it note help signs that were visible from the offices on the other side of the street. They looked like they were just constantly having fun. And that's it. But when a new product owner started working with them, he noticed that he has never seen a more effective team. The amount of software they were able to produce was amazing. It was almost 3 times what his previous teams, best of his previous teams, were able to do. The second team was a tiny little bit different. They were also sitting in an open space. But that open space was 90 people, and it was dead. Completely. The only thing you could hear across actually really 90 people sitting in there was clicking of mice and tap-a-tap of the keyboard. That was it. Sometimes you could have heard a phone ring, then that person would back up and just go somewhere to talk. Looking closer, you could have seen someone on a chair that was looking a little younger than the rest, that was trying to ask someone a question. He or she never received an answer and came back. Actually looking at their monitor, that's it. Actually at 9 o'clock, that open space was kind of busy because everybody was having their stand-ups. Everybody at 9 o'clock. So, but then it went dead again. So these two teams were very different. So how were they different? Let's take a closer look at that. The biggest difference was their culture. What you know is that culture is something that evolves in an environment. You know that if an environment is open, an open culture is going to evolve in there. If an environment is closed, the same kind of culture is going to evolve. Take a look at cultural differences in between countries. Depending on what is allowed and what is not, those parts of culture either flourish or die out. And then the culture is shaped by an environment, but then that culture actually starts shaping the environment. That's a little paradox, but still. You can take a look at how the culture of collaboration in the early communist and post-communist eras, here in Poland and around, has been shaped because officially on the surface, it was something completely different than what it was really. It was a neighbor helping neighbor. There were people collaborating on every single possible plane. Did you know that actually consumption of meat was higher than today, in the moment when there was barely any meat available? because people were collaborating so well at distributing it. So the culture shapes environments. So if you start changing the environment, are you able to change the culture, or it's the other way around? Will that culture actually reshape that environment to suit them again? That's interesting, because it might go both ways. Long time ago, Peter Drucker said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Anybody heard of this? Few people, yeah. This is so true. Your management can say, okay, let's do some strategic initiative and let's change the way we're developing as an organization. Let's go that way. So we're starting to go that way, but the culture says, sorry, no. We're going back to here. You probably know this from agile transformations, that you're trying and you're working so hard on this team and that organization, and you're working with that manager, and actually something starts to change, and these guys are starting to collaborate, and it actually is working. But then that umbrella manager that was working with them disappears because he was upgraded vertically to somewhere there. And what happens? Poof. It all disappears from day to day. Many of these people actually sometimes even leave the company, because this is exactly what happens. The remaining culture ate that strategically transformed element for breakfast. Now I'm going to tell you a few things you know. I just want to make sure that you remember that. 3 out of 4 Agile Manifesto rules talks about business. Not many people realize that. Scrum is something for product delivery. I know that you know that. Then a sense of urgency is the first step to transform the organization, right? And trainings, even though I'm a trainer myself, alone won't change your organization. It's impossible. So I know that you know that. So let's dive a little deeper. In every single organization that was able to sustain the change, business levers have been used. At first, I thought that every of these organizations actually used a different lever. They were just using something they came up with, but actually, you can categorize them into a few different options. At first, I thought that there is several of them, but in fact, after a few consultations, they came down to being 7. And I hope that this is going to help you. So first interesting story I have been told is, a few years ago, I have been regularly training people in Singapore. I have been invited there to work with mainly product owners. And I was told by a Singaporean that actually Singapore isn't managed like a country. It isn't even managed like a city. Even though it's an island that's 30 kilometers wide and probably something about 15 kilometers. So 15 by 30, not too big. They even needed to find a place for a pretty nice airport, actually the best airport in the world. So they couldn't find any more room for an amusement park or somewhere to actually do something fun. So they built it on the ocean. And I'm absolutely serious. Singapore is fascinating because since 1970s, actually even earlier, It was managed like a company. The Prime Minister of Singapore said, okay, let's do some changes. Let's start by changing economical status of our citizens. How did he do that? Oh, come on, yeah. His name was Lee Kuan Yew. Sorry, I'm really bad at it if it comes to Asian names. And he said that we're going to be disciplined. We're going to make smart investment decisions. And this was something he was talking about their education and investing in the future of youth. Smart investment decisions in that context. And this is actually what they did. They thought, okay, let's do some long-term investments. So they actually started investing in education. Let's do some short-term investments. So they started investing in healthcare, and they started investing in making their city actually quite a little more prettier. A little more pretty. Sorry, it's late. So people actually started coming in to visit Singapore. And then when educated young people started taking over the city, they started making another smart investment decisions. 30 years later, Singapore is one of the richest cities in the world. Actually, it's quite beautiful. It's absolutely amazingly clean. It's even better than many European standards, and if it comes to Asian standards, it's incomparable. Yeah? So Singapore actually made investment decisions. It was managed like a company. They changed their business first. So again, let's take a closer look. What changed? First thing, sense of urgency. The sense of urgency is one of the 7 business levers that is able to shape the culture. Let's take an interesting case of Ford. I don't know if you know, I think it was 1995. Yeah, it was 1995. When Ford was on the brink of bankruptcy. Their stock market, their stocks are actually going very, very low. A new CEO inherited that from the previous one, and the new CEO, since he already changed the Boeing company when they were in big trouble, he said, okay, first we need to make sure that people understand how serious this is. And he actually broadcasted information saying, okay, we don't want to die, because that's where Ford was. That information got out, and everybody thought, okay, there actually is a chance that Ford will cease to exist. Let's start doing something about it. Interestingly, another company at approximately the same time had a similar problem, GE. GE was so huge, so massive, that they actually failed to even perceive what they have inside of the company. GE said, okay, we're a technology company, and smaller companies all around the world are actually eating us on their local markets. And that information was spread out. As you know, both Ford and GE successfully transformed their cultures so that they were able to reshape the whole company. GE is even right now called the 125-year-old startup. And there actually is quite some truth to that. Right now, you might observe that in banks. How many of you had some interaction with banking recently? Quite a few, yeah. Banks right now are kind of in danger, right? Because there are few of them that were able to adapt technologically, and the others are very, very far behind. So they start feeling that sense of urgency. So this is the first one, the initial cultural lever. What else could you do? The other thing is purpose. So, okay, we can start changing the culture, but without people understanding what we're really doing this for, I don't think we can succeed. Because many of those companies really have a business purpose. We're not talking about making the world a better place for our employees. This isn't a business purpose. An interestingly good business purpose is at Spotify. Spotify has any music anywhere. It is a business thing. It is something for their users, something for their customers. There is a Mexican company that's producing cement. It's called Cemex. Anybody heard of it? Some people did. Because it's an interesting case. Cemex thought, okay, we can produce cement. We're good at that. But why not help local communities? We are going to give them access to not only cement, but we're actually going to build shops for homeowners, for them to be able to fix their homes themselves. And that kind of purpose actually drove all of their employees to reshaping the company. It was decentralized, it changed a lot, it started collaborating. Last but not least, probably some of you heard of a huge Indian concern called Tata. Some of you probably did, yeah, quite a few. It's actually even present here in Poland, not only with cars, but also Tata produces many drinks. They own, I think it's close to 15% of tea market here in Poland. Tata has also an interesting way of working. Ratan Tata, their CEO, actually their founder, I'm not sure if he's a CEO anymore. He said, okay, we need to support people from all around India so that we will be able to shape a good company. So what he did, he actually financed education for people from small villages where basically there were no perspectives for development. And he brought them into larger cities, and because they couldn't help their family, they actually got some pocket money, not for themselves, but were sent back to those families. In fact, in many places of the Tata concern, they have no rotation if it comes to employees, nothing like that. So they started having a business purpose of actually transforming small communities. They gave their services there, and they actually took their employees from over there. So this is another case. Another lever is the product itself. One of our customers is an interesting case. They're not far away from here, but unfortunately I cannot tell you their name, even though they're quite amazing, so I would love them to hear about that. They started their transformation by actually looking at their product. They did that right. They were sure that they actually have 56 distinct products. So we started working together because, working on 56 distinct products while you have 150 people in the development is kind of a labyrinth. They did kind of like a cloud development. It's just that this is the cloud of developers not knowing where they are. So we started taking a look at where their products are, and we actually started pulling out where exactly those products are. In fact, after a few iterations, because first we identified 9, then we identified 8, in fact, they actually have 4 products. That's it. The moment they identified 4 products and they actually started seeding people according to the products they were working in, suddenly their organization and their culture started drifting towards way more agility than it used to be before. Because people started understanding what they're working on. Another interesting, huge case of product development was Apple. Apple is product managed. Or at least it was when Jobs was still the CEO. Right now, I don't really want to quarrel about that because I know that there are different opinions about it. So there were product lines that people were organized again. And take a look how often Apple was able to release new version of the product, or actually a completely new product. These were just a couple of years for introducing something completely new to the market, something that was potentially revolutionizing it. So another is product, or actually customer journey also works, just like the product organization. Another business lever, transparency. You might know it from Scrum, right? Transparency on a business side, because transparency on a business side sometimes is, let's say, overlooked. So people think that, or actually management thinks that they need to have insights to their teams, but don't believe that teams should have insight to what the business decisions are. So here, again, Ford happened here. Ford actually started transforming their culture the moment they decided, actually the management board decided that they are going to disclose all of their decisions, so that it actually was somewhere in an online tool. They were able to propagate it throughout the company. There are a few other cases, but I really have to rush. Another one is decentralization. This, an example was a GE. An interesting decentralization is also 3M. You probably know Post-it notes and stuff, right? 3M is a huge company that produces mainly chemistry and stuff like this. They have very distinct divisions that are actually very autonomous. And they're not centrally managed. Of course, there is something like this, but 3M looks like a federation, if you take a look at it. GE as well. Google also looks like a federation. And focusing on something. Interesting example, Apple again. When Jobs was still there, Apple actually produced 5 products, actually 5 product lines. That was it, nothing more, just 5. They concentrated on that, and their culture was constantly supporting that, was constantly supporting what they were building, what they were developing. And last but not least, measurements. So, business measurements. How many of you is actually using the NPS, so the Net Promoter Score, in their businesses? Quite a few of you. It's actually a pretty good measurement, but is it enough? So successful companies actually measure their business performance. Wrapping up, how did the two-team story end? The first one, actually, they had their own product owner that was really managing their business. So the one that was having fun. The other one had a business. It was a company that was the first in the market. Actually, it was almost the only in the market. So they didn't really care for their business. So the teams were very, very far away. They didn't even know who was using their product. They had no connection to the business whatsoever. So their culture never had a chance to be shaped by the business. So, summing up, why aren't you working? 7 of those: sense of urgency, product, transparency, purpose, decentralization, focus, and measurements. these are the business levers that you might want to use in your business in order to shape the culture you're working in. Thank you so much.